Hello everybody, Jose Rodriguez here. It is midweek and I decided to do this video today rather than later because someone asked this question just a few minutes ago. There's a lot of confusion as to what happens when you initiate a printer from the box, that is. You get it, it is brand new. You open up the box, you take out all of the contents, remove all of the tape that the printer comes with. Again, they don't want anything moving around during shipment. So once you have removed all of that protective tape, you either install the printhead on a Canon printer and then load cartridges, or you just load the cartridges on an EPSON printer and then power it on. And then it goes through what? It goes through a recharge cycle or a ink refill or ink charge or priming process. Many different names for the same thing. All it's doing is loading inks. Now think about this. When a car comes out of the assembly line, it does not have any gas in its tank. Now the tank is usually located in the rear end of the car. And so there is a line from the tank itself all the way to the front of the car, connects through the carburetor if you have an old car, or the fuel injectors, keeping it simple here folks. And all of that space needs to be filled with gasoline or petrol, depending where you come from. There was nothing but air there before. So it's going to take several ounces, maybe more, of gasoline to prime your engine. Now, when you get it off the lot, you've already test drove it, so it has gas. So when you go fill it up at the local gas station, the next time you need gas, they usually give you a full tank, right? You're going to use every drop of that fuel that you just purchased. Not so with a printer, okay? The printer lines or space between where you install the cartridges on top of the printhead, they have air, and that air has to be displaced and it has to be primed so that the printhead has absolutely zero air in it. Now, on a printer like the Pro-100 or any of the EPSON printers that have cartridges that ride on top of the printhead assembly, it uses a minimal amount of ink because there's really no space between the actual cartridge and the printhead itself that it needs to be, filled with ink. It's pretty much directly. It's going to use an ml or two per cartridge, depending on the printer. People have the notion that you get so-called setup cartridges or tester cartridges or whatever, and that they are not fully full. Now, let me give you a bit of an illustration here. I have right here a Pro-100 cartridge. It has never been modified. I use this. This is still OEM ink. I use this when I perform my comparison between Precisioncolors and OEM. I loaded a set of OEM cartridges on my Pro-100, ran 2 cleaning cycles, 2 of them, and then proceeded to make, oh gosh, maybe 7 9x12 prints, including a standard image. Can you see how much ink actually got used? You see that? That cartridge was pretty much filled to the top. Okay, now when it is new, they can do that. And they can make sure that the serpentine vent is not being clogged with ink like you can when you start refilling these. But that's a long story that we'll cover in another video. So as you can see, I hardly used any ink at all, even though I performed 2 cleaning cycles after it did the purge, which it does when you install any cartridges. And then I printed 7 each 9x12 prints, and you still got a ton of ink left. Now, what happens with a printer that uses stationary cartridges? By the way, the Pro-10, same thing. It rides on top of the printhead. So it's going to use minimal amount of ink to set up your printer. So did they cheat you? Did they give you less ink than you should need? No, they gave you a full-blown cartridge. The reason it says setup cart, I don't know why. It really has no less ink than the regular ones you will buy down the road. Now, Pro-1000, P800, okay, 80 milliliters of ink each. Actually, this has 10 extra, but that's a secret. Different story. This is what really makes people think that they're getting cheated. They're getting a lower volume setup cartridge. That's because when you load those cartridges on a P800 or a Pro-1000, you have miles of ink line that needs to be flushed out of the air and filled with ink. Well, not quite miles. You know what I mean. There's a lot of spaces in there. There's a lot that needs to be flushed out and filled with ink. With the Pro-1000, even worse, because there are internal compartments and also internal dampers inside the printhead. Those are miniature versions of these. Okay, they all have to be filled with ink, and then not just so that it is now full, but flushed out of the printhead itself. So it continues to fill it, only to make sure absolutely that you have pushed out all the air. Okay, now that ink, yeah, it goes into the internal ink pads of a printer such as a Pro-10, Pro-100, or EPSON 2880, or a P400. On a printer such as the Pro-1000 and the P800 and others that have stationary type cartridges, they will have, most of them, not all of them, they will have a user replaceable waste ink cartridge. That's where that ink goes, either internally in the printer itself or into one of those containers, which you can change on your own. No such thing with the internal waste ink pads, by the way. You have to send that in to have it service when the time comes. So really, are you really losing ink? And that's where the thinking comes through. People, oh, my cartridges are at half, 50%. All I did was initiate the printer. Well, it took 50% of your 80 milliliters of ink to flush out the air out of those ink lines, fill the internal compartments, and also the dampers inside the printhead, and squirt out some ink to make sure that it is actually squirting out ink and not air. So yeah, some of that ink did get wasted, okay, I have to admit, but the majority of it is still living inside the printer. Just like the car that you drove home from the dealership had a full fuel line filled with gasoline from the tank all the way to your carburetor or your fuel injectors, whatever kind of car you bought, but you get the drift. So next time you buy cartridges, then none of this is going to really happen because you've already primed the system. All you're going to be doing is just basically supplementing what's already in there. But just be aware that the ink is not lost. It's inside the printer. It's going to still be used to produce prints. So not to worry. They're not selling you setup carts with only half the volume of ink. It just seems that way because the ink levels will drastically drop after you finish the ink recharge or initiation or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so not to fear. The ink is not lost. It is living inside the printer, and you'll be able to continue to use it. All you got to do then is add supplemental ink behind it. All right, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. And as always, happy printing. Don't worry about this. Bye-bye, everybody.